All right, guys. So we're going to be looking at the background of mathematics. All right. So we're going to start off by looking at the nature of mathematics itself. What are some of the things that you're expecting to be doing when you're doing mathematics? So you must be able to reason well. Now, sometimes people argue that reasoning is not something that you can teach anyone. But I believe that if you spend more time learning the concepts, then it will make your reasoning better because you will have knowledge of what the concept is, you will have an understanding of what the concept is saying, and based on that, you can come to a better conclusion for your answer. All right? So, reasoning is important. Now, your reasoning will relate to the concepts and the definition that you would have learned, right? And the laws are the rules that you would have learned. Now, the procedure now would be based on the algorithm. Now, some questions have particular procedure that you follow, like a recipe. So you would have, that is what we call the algorithm. So you have certain steps that you follow during the procedure. So that you will have to practice. So I would say, get the understanding from the concept, but when you're doing a procedure, you practice the procedure and bearing the concepts in mind. Is that clear, guys? Raise your hand if you understand that. So mathematics requires reasoning, it requires procedural and practical work. Now, the practical work now. So the procedure is a step-by-step process of how to solve a particular question, but the practical work now is where you spend a lot of time practicing a procedure. Now, just like driving a car, you don't get the procedure when you drive it one time. You have to do it a number of times and do the same thing over and over again until you get it right. So mathematics is like that. You will solve a problem following a procedure, but if you don't practice it over and over, it won't stick. So a part of how you remember things is to do it repeatedly, right? So if you're going to learn it or keep it into long-term memory, you have to spend some time to practice it. But you first learn the concept, understand the concept, then you understand and learn the procedure, then you practice regularly all of what you would have learned already, right? Now, another thing about maths is that instead of using a lot of words, we use a lot of symbols, right? So you will find that you have all different types of symbols that represent different things in math. And so the symbols are treated with specific definitions. So when you see a symbol, you need to know the meaning of that symbol, because every symbol has a definition of what it really means. And if you spend time to learn these definitions of the symbol, then when you see the symbols, you know exactly how to approach a question and read the question. All right. So mathematics use a lot of symbols to cut down on the amount of words that we would have to write if we didn't use any symbols. All right. Now, another thing about math, we have a lot of definitions. We also have a lot of theorems, and we also have some rules, and some of these rules are also called principles. All right. Now, just to make a little comparison, we say that mathematics is really an extension to English language. And I put that statement there So I'm going to ask you why you think I actually make that statement. Anybody?
Could you repeat, sir?
I said that mathematics is an extension of English language. Can you say why you think I made that statement? Can you think of that and tell me why I said it?
Writing and reasoning, sir.
Writing and reasoning? Well, yeah, writing and reasoning, but not just writing and reasoning. When you think of English language, what is its purpose? What is the sole purpose of English language?
Teacher,
Yeah, what do you use English for?
grammar, sir.
All right, so apart from just the grammar and so on, it's really for you to communicate in a certain way, right?
Yes.
Right, and when you're communicating in English, generally, what are some of the things that you would do? You'd be able to construct sentences. You should be able to write essays and do comprehensions and so on. Now, when you think about English in terms of how you would write a descriptive essay, what would you generally do when you're writing descriptive essays?
Describing whatever you're writing about.
Right, so you describe what you're writing about. And for description, you would use your 5 sentences, look around the surrounding, and describe based on what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, and tasting, right? Now, when you think about that, what we're really doing is we are looking at our world in a descriptive way. And to have a description of our world, what we're looking at is the quality of our world. So I would say English language has to do with a qualitative view of our environment, our space, or whatever we're looking at in our world, right? Would you agree with that? Raise your hand if you're agreeing with me or if you disagree. All right, so whereas you use English language to describe qualitatively, how would we use mathematics? How would we use mathematics to describe the world that we're in? Is mathematics speaking about quality or quantity? What is it speaking about?
Quantity, sir.
Quantity, right.
Calculating quality.
Right. So when we do math, we are looking at the world in a quantitative way. It means that what we're saying to ourselves, the things that exist in our world, we can quantify them, we can measure them, right? And so we can measure them and we can count them and we can know how many of them we have in terms of amount and so on. And so that's what really math is doing. Math is looking at the world that you're in and making measurements of things that you may be interested in. And more than you know it, there is a lot of math that you do in everyday life that you are not so much aware of, right? Even when you're cooking a meal, you're doing some mathematics unconsciously. Because if you are cooking, you tend to know how much, let's say you're cooking some meat, you tend to know how much onion you're going to use, how much pepper, how much salt, how much seasoning. you don't just throw a whole bundle of things without taking into consideration the amount, because you know too much salt going there going to spoil the taste, right? So unconsciously, you kind of know how much you would put in there to get the kind of taste that you want. Is that so? Is that so, Miss Waysome?
Yes, sir.
Right. So even when you're cooking, you're really doing mathematics in a unconscious way. And you do the same thing when you're baking too. So there are many things around you that mathematics are applied to, but sometimes we take these things for granted. And really and truly, the world that we're in can be studied from a mathematical point of view, because there are a lot of things in our universe that obeys mathematics. Most things in the universe obeys the laws of mathematics. Even our time system, how we measure time is based on mathematics, because we measure time based on how many days it takes the earth to go around the sun. And that's a quantitative measurement, right? And from that, out of that came the inches and the feet and the yard. All of those came out of that system. So even though we use these things on a day-to-day basis, we're not realizing that we're really doing math every day, because math is really important in the quantitative sense. So based on all that is said, I will define mathematics to be the study of numbers and quantities. So when we talk about numbers, what should really come to your mind then? So we have math being the study of numbers and quantities. So numbers are what? They are what? Symbols that we use to represent the size of quantity, or what we are measuring in terms of the quantity, how much we have. So the numbers really tell you the amount, right? So these symbols, if you have 3 and if you have 10, you have a sense of which one is larger or which one is smaller based on the number system. Is that clear, guys? Raise your hand if you understand that. All right, so the numbers are the symbols that measure the amount, that we use to measure the amount where quantities are concerned. But the quantities now are the things that we are measuring, right? And in what unit that we are measuring them, right? So that's what we are dealing with when we talk about quantity. So now we have a quantity such as length. If you're measuring length, you know that you'll have to use a meter rule and or a tape measure. And then with length now, you have unit of measurement. What unit are you measuring it in? Are you measuring it in inches and feet? Are you measuring it in centimeters, meters, kilometers? And those will tell you the unit of measurement. So every quantity, when you measure them, they have their own unit of measurement. Can anybody tell me what the unit of measurement for mass? When you measure mass, what unit you measure it in? Miss Trevio, you want to give that a try?
Gram.
Oh, all right, Mr. Ojeno, it is grams or kilograms, all right? So here, length is a quantity that can be measured. Mass is another quantity that can be measured. Temperature is also a quantity that can be measured. Can anybody tell me what units that we measure temperature in?
Degrees Celsius.
Sir.
Degrees Celsius, right? And the quantity of temperature is to tell us how hot or cold something is, right? What about time? When we talk about time, what unit do we measure time in?
Second, minute, or hour? So seconds, minutes, or hour?
Yes, exactly. So here we have different quantities that we measured in different units. And so mathematics is about the study of numbers and quantities. And then now, having studying the numbers, then we may have what we call operations that we use on the numbers. Anybody know any operation that we use on numbers? Anybody?
Sir, can repeat again?
Can you tell me some operation that we use on numbers or with numbers?
Referring to like the plus, minus, multiplication, division, sir?
Exactly so. So those are operations that we use on numbers. So what you really see here is that mathematics is about using numbers, operations, and measuring quantities. Is that clear to you guys? Raise your hand if it is clear as crystal. All right, so I guess it's not very clear to everybody. So the world that you're in, you have things around you. We can measure them, and we measure them based on different quantity of measurements. If we're dealing with mass, we have different units for mass. We measure mass in gram, we measure length in centimeters or inches. We measure temperature in degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. We measure time in seconds, hours, and so on. All right. So that's the background to our math, and we are actually moving along. So now there are three broad areas in mathematics. We have arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. Can somebody tell me what, or describe to me what is arithmetic about? Ms. Waysome, you want to give us?
Yes, sir. Dealing with properties, sir, is like communicative laws, associative law, distributive laws, etc.
All right. So so the laws that you would have mentioned, you would use them in arithmetic. But even though those laws are used in arithmetic, the main feature behind arithmetic is that you're working with numbers and operations, right? So you're really not dealing with any unknown when you're doing arithmetic. So from primary school, you learn how to add specific values or numbers. So you may have 2 or 3-digit numbers that you learn to add and subtract, multiply, and divide. And all of that process that you have been working with, numbers and operation, all of that falls under arithmetic. And then, as Ms. Wilson would have mentioned, all of these laws relating to operation would also fall under arithmetic. So can anybody tell me now what you understand by algebra? What do you understand about algebra, Ms. Trivia?
Sir, all I can remember algebra has to do with letters and numbers.
Okay. All right. Ms. Waysome, would you like to add anything to what Ms. Trivia has said? Are you there, Ms. Waysome?
Yes, sir. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Yes, sir. I was saying also it is an extension where expressions are concerned.
Okay, so Ms. Trivia,
Equations and expressions, yes.
All right. Now, the thing about algebra is that we use letters of the alphabet as representation of numbers, right? Now, and hence the name algebra kind of give a sense of alphabet. So you know you're taking different symbols from alphabet, and you know you have different you have Greek letters and you have English letters. And so in mathematics, you work with a lot of letters from Greek. And so like the pi that you use when you're dealing with circles is a Greek letter. And then now theta that you use when you're dealing with angles, that's also a Greek letter. And alpha and beta, all of those are letters from the Greek alphabet, right? So to let it the symbols be a little bit more not so to let them be a little bit more distinct, we tend to use Greek letters because they are not as commonly used as the English letters, right? If you notice in English, the two letters that seem to be used mostly in math is generally X and Y. Even though there are cases where you might use other letters like A, B, C, and D, you may use any letter at all in mathematics. But we commonly use X and Y in math, maybe because they are not so commonly used in English. I don't know, but we tend to have a lot of X and a lot of Y's in mathematics. All right, what about geometry now? Can anybody tell me what they understand about geometry?
Having to do with measurement, sir.
All right, so having to do with measurement. Anything else anybody want to add to what Ms. Wilson has said? What about you, Ajeno? Do you have anything to add about geometry?
No, sir.
All right. So, all right. So geometry is really like the foundation for mathematics, right? Just to give you the heads up, guys. So in another 10 minutes, you will have to log out, join back because the Zoom going to restart in that time. Now geometry is really kind of what is one of the areas that really drives mathematics. Because geometry really has to do with a lot of shapes and figures in the physical world. Now, when you're doing architecture, when you're building buildings and so on, way back in ancient time, they usually make a lot of arcs and circular patterns and triangular patterns and so on in their constructions. So because of that, being able to work out angles and diameters and circumference, you would need to have some kind of math to do these things. And so as a result, you come across a lot of principles, formulas that are used in geometry. So geometry really relates mostly to shapes and angles, dimensions of objects, right? So that's how geometry plays its role in maths. So it really is a driving force of math because the more you build, is the more you might want new maths to figure out what you're doing. All right, is that clear to everybody? Raise your hand, please, if it is clear to you. Okay. All right, so just to give a sense of what these three broad areas are, now arithmetic deals with the calculation of specific values in which various operations are carried out on numbers. And these are some symbols that you would normally see in arithmetic. So all of these symbols you would come across when you're doing arithmetic. So the important thing here is that it deals with what? It deals with specific values. Can somebody tell me what they understand by specific values? When we say something is specific, what it means?
Direct.
All right, direct can probably.
It's actual value, sir.
The actual value, the exact value, specific value that if you specify this value to be 10, then you know at all time that value is going to be 10. So you know exactly the amount you have when you're dealing with specific value. So you know the value in terms of how much you have, in terms of a number, right? That's what specific values are about. So we usually, when we're adding values in arithmetic, we're using specific amount that we use the numbers to write. So if we have like an amount of 267, that is a specific value. And so this specific value, you may want to add it to another specific value. So let's say you have 332. All right, let me use 332. And then now you add them. And once you add specific values, you are going to get back another specific value. Any question about that, guys? Is it clear? Raise your hand. If you are following me, just raise your hand and give me an idea if you understand what I'm saying. All right, so with that said, let us now look.
Can you repeat, sir?
So I was saying that arithmetic deals with when you're working with specific values, and specific values is actually a number that you know exactly how much you have, right? So anything, any number that you get to work with, if you're adding two different numbers or so on, those are what we call specific values, because they are specified by the number, the symbols that we use when we to represent quantities, and these symbols are really the numbers that we're using. All right, is that clear now, miss? All right, so looking now at algebra, we said that algebra deals with the calculation of general values in which various operations are carried out on symbols, which would be letters of the alphabet, representing general quantities. Now, if you notice here in algebra, we have a lot of numbers mixing with letters, right? So in algebra, we may write quantities in terms of a letter, which we generally call an unknown. We may write quantities in terms of an expression, which is when you have 3 or 4 unknowns, different unknowns added together. We may also deal with a lot of formulas when we're dealing with algebra, all right? So when we're looking at formulas, especially if you're doing science, science tend to carry a lot of formulas. And anybody can tell me what the purpose of formulas, what are formulas for?
To help you solve mathematical problems, sir.
Right. And why we use formulas is that most times if you are to do something that going to require the same procedure over and over again, you can use a formula. Now, a formula is a reusable equation, an equation that you can use over and over again. Now, if you have a formula like, say, weight, W is equal to mg. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to really know what this formula is, but let me see if there is anyone who might know what the formula is about. What is this formula about? Anybody?
Milligram, sir.
Give me a second here. The formula here is not really milligram formula. This formula has to do with a relationship with weight, mass, and gravity, right? Now, how we generally use a formula? Now, a formula generally is an equation written with letters or symbols, and these symbols don't generally have any specific value, right? They would now have general value, meaning that you could put any value for M and any value for G. Now, how the formula is written is generally you would have one letter by itself on one side of the formula, and that letter by itself on one side of the formula is what we generally refer to as the subject of the formula. So if you have a letter or a symbol by itself on one side of an equation, and on the other side, you have a number of different symbols being added or subtracted. Now, so this left-hand side where you have W by itself, W is what? It is a subject. On the other side, where we have mg, meaning they're multiplying mass times gravity, that would be a term. So